Prithvi Shantirantarikshagam Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragnish Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Takshinam Mukham Te Namam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Last week, we saw the first 5 verses of this book, Vivekachudamani. And the primary message that came to us through those 5 verses was that this human birth that we have is a great opportunity. Because one of the questions we have to ask ourselves when we undertake a study like this is, what is the purpose of my study? Why am I reading this book? Why am I studying this book? And there could be any number of reasons. For some people, it could be merely a curiosity of what this book says. For some others who may have studied other Vedanta texts, it's an opportunity to read something more about Vedanta and see whether what this book offers is something similar to what they have read before, or it has some additional insights. But for some, this book could also be that I trust in the wisdom that is offered in this text, that this has the potentiality to set me free. So the benefit that we get from this study will depend on the purpose of why we are undertaking this study. We all get what we want, and therefore we have to ask ourselves, what is it that I want from this book? And so the first 5 verses that we saw last time tried to emphasize on our minds that this book has something more to offer than merely satisfying our intellectual curiosity, something more to offer than merely giving us some food for thought, that this book can set us free. It also pointed out that the human birth that we have now is a very rare opportunity. That in this cosmic scenario, when we think about billions and billions of years of history, of past and the future, that merely 100 odd years that a human lifespan is just a drop in the ocean. That if this cycle is going to be repeated life after life, and if it is possible for me to return to this experience of being a living creature, that can occur in any of the different species, not necessarily always as a human being. that is one of the questions that is often asked about reincarnation. That now that I'm a human being, and if I believe in rebirth, will I be a human being in every future birth? And the Vedantic understanding of the theory of Punarjanma or rebirth is, we can really be born not simply as human beings, but as any living creature, anywhere in this cosmos. So if we see the blessings involved in our present situation, there is no guarantee that these blessings will be present in a future birth. Maybe we might have to take birth 1,000,000 times more before we get the kind of favorable circumstances that we have now. And therefore, this is a great opportunity not to be missed. The book went to the extent of saying that if we miss this opportunity, that knowing the opportunities available to us, if we don't make the best use of it, that is a real suicide. That was to kind of shake us up out of our complacency in thinking that this is not merely an intellectual discussion, that this is something that can truly set us free. The verses that we'll look at today, the next set of verses, experience the importance of experiencing our true nature, our nature as the Atman, over other forms of spiritual practice. Because the word spiritual practice is a very general term. When people say that I'm into spirituality or I do spiritual practice, it can mean many different things. The question that can be asked is that is every spiritual practice, every form of spiritual practice equally effective in giving us freedom? Or some practices are more direct and some others are somewhat indirect. The Vivekachudamani view is that knowing our true nature as the Atman, that is the direct method. That's the way we will get freedom. All other practices are helpful. Not that they are useless, but by themselves, only by themselves, they cannot set me free. So we will see something in more detail about that. So let's look at verse number 6. I will read the original first. Pathantu shastrani yajantu devan kurvantu karmani bhajantu devataha atmaikya bodhena vina vimuktihi na siddhyati brahma shatantarepi. People may study scriptures, sacrifice to the gods, do work, and worship the deities, but without experiencing oneness with Atman, spiritual freedom cannot be achieved, even in a span that equals hundreds of Brahma's lifetimes. So as I was saying, what this verse directly says is that all these other forms of practice, such as studying of scriptures, like what we are doing now, sacrificing to the gods. In the Vedic periods, they had these forms of ritual where they call the yajnas. So all forms of worship are really a way of offering. I mean, you're offering something, you are sacrificing, you are giving what you thought was yours to a divine being. So And those sacrifices, again, can be of many different kinds. What we offer in a worship here at the Vedanta temple, usually fruits and sweets and flowers, but many different regular cooked food is offered. Sometimes animal sacrifices were also done. So what is offered, what is sacrificed could take many different forms. But beyond these external offerings, what these offerings really required was the giving of our own ego, sacrificing one's own ego, surrendering one's own ego. That is the real thing. Merely making all these external offerings with not any inner sacrifice involved, that worship could not be complete. So, studying of scriptures, sacrificing to the gods, doing work. So the word work will come again and again, especially in these initial verses. The word work, of course, is karmani. It's work, karma. So we might say, well, does it mean that we should stop all work? So the word work, when it comes in these texts, is often understood in two different ways. The first and primary meaning of karma is Vaidika karma, the rituals that are enjoined in the Vedas. So there are certain things the Vedas say, if you want this, you should do this, or don't do this. So the word work, as referring directly to the Vedas, really means the scriptural do's and don'ts. But work also includes the kind of work you and I do on a daily basis. So if the work enjoined in the Vedas is called Vaidika karma, all other work is called Laukika karma, coming from the word loka, the work that we do in the world. So we might say spiritual work and secular work. That's how generally we tend to make this distinction. But in both the kinds of works, what is common is my sense that I'm the one doing that work, the sense of agency, that I'm the doer of those actions. So, doing work involves or includes the sense of agentship. And that is a problem, as we will see going forward. Because the Atman, which is my true nature, is neither the doer nor the experiencer. So every work that I do in life, with the idea that I am doing it, I don't have my right nature being expressed through that. And that is why doing work is considered, even if you do something good, for instance, even charity, even helping those who are in need. Now that's not bad work, that's good work. But even good work involves a sense of agency, that I'm the one who is doing this good work. And worshipping the deities, none of these can help directly other than experiencing oneness with Atman in order for us to get spiritual freedom. And it says, even in a span of that equals hundreds of Brahma's lifetimes. That is, you can keep on doing all these things, worship and charity and so on, and you could do that for millions of years, but still that cannot set you free. Brahma, by the way, there's one important thing to keep in mind, because one word that comes often in Vedanta texts is Brahman. Now this one is Brahma. So they are two distinct words. So Brahma, it ends with an A, a longer A, Brahma, is that aspect of the divine which is responsible for the creation, for the projection of this world. So the world that we experience has a beginning, it ends, and it has a period in between where it is sustained. In Sanskrit, it is called Srishti, that is the beginning of the world. Sthiti, when the world is maintained, its functions continue. And Pralaya, when the world is absorbed back. So it comes from a source, the divine source. The divine source sustains it, and then it gets absorbed back into that divine source. Now, each of these three functions gets identified with an aspect of the divine. So the divine is one, but that aspect of the divine, which is responsible for projecting this universe, is called Brahma, and is personified in his personality of Brahma. Then that aspect of the divine, which sustains and nourishes and maintains this universe, is traditionally identified and called Vishnu. And that aspect of the divine, which is responsible for reabsorbing this universe back into the subtle form, is called Shiva. So that's the Vedantic Trinity, if you like. It's not exactly, I probably shouldn't use the word Trinity because theologically they are very different. But nevertheless, we have these three forms of the divine responsible for Srishti, Sthiti, and Pralaya. So Brahma is the one who projects it. Now this Brahma, I don't know how they calculated it, but a day of Brahma, according to some calculations, is said to be equal to 432 million human years. Now that seems like a big number. And what this verse points out is, even in a span that equals hundreds of Brahma's lifetimes, so if one day of a Brahma is 432 millions of human years, then hundreds of Brahma's lifetimes. So it's enough to know. Don't worry about these numbers. No need to any calculation. It just means it's a long time. It's again to emphasize that you keep on doing this for almost like an infinite amount of time, still it cannot set you free unless and until Atma Aikya Bodhena. Aikya means oneness. Unless you experience the oneness with the Atman, none of these other things will help. And the simple answer to clarify this position is that what is really the problem? Because the solution to any problem depends on understanding what the problem is. Now, the problem, as Vedanta sees it, as the Vivekachudamani emphasizes, is that I have forgotten my true nature. That is the problem. My true nature is that I am the Atman. I have forgotten it. That is the cause of bondage. If that is the problem, then the solution has to be, I should then know what's my true nature. It's simple. I have forgotten it. I should know it. Done deal. Instead of knowing my true nature, if all I keep on doing is doing charity for millions of years, doing all this worship for millions of years, all that might help if I do charity selflessly, if I do worship with real devotion, that will purify my heart. So it's not that those things are useless. If I do them well, they will purify my heart, and as they say, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So yes, through purity of my heart, eventually it will lead me to freedom. But still, it's not a direct path to freedom. The direct cause of the freedom would be getting the knowledge that I am the Atman. It's a little bit like saying, if this room is dark and I want light there, then clearly the switches are there at the end of the room. I need to go and switch it on. And the room, there will be light. Now, the problem is that the room is dark. I need light. Only light can remove darkness. Now, I can say, well, in order to go to that switch, I have to walk. So we could say, walking will help. Of course, walking will help. Now, if I go and walk on the Charles, that's also walking. But that's not going to bring light into this room. So, yes, walking in the right direction toward the switch, using my hands to switch on, all these things are helpful. But ultimately, the direct cause of removing the darkness is light. So similarly, all these other spiritual practices are helpful, but the direct cause of attaining freedom is knowing my Atman nature. And this theme will continue in the next few verses as well. Look at verse 7. Amrutatvasya na shasti vitte netyeva hi shrutihi braviti karmano mukter ahetutvam sputam yataha. According to the Vedas, immortality cannot be attained with the help of wealth. Hence, it is clear that work cannot lead to spiritual freedom. The reference is to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There is this passage there which says, neither by work, nor by progeny, nor by wealth, but by renunciation alone did some attain immortality. Now, renunciation is primarily renouncing this little ego. But if I spend all my time, if the purpose of my life would be like getting more wealth, becoming famous, or whatever other goals we might have, all those goals will require that my ego will be active. And to the extent my ego is active, I might do wonders in the world. I could be considered a genius. I'll get the Nobel Prize. I will become a celebrity. All those things are possible with the help of the ego. But I will not be free. I will be born again, maybe as some, I don't want to speculate. None of us knows what we are going to be. But what if we are born in some really challenging circumstances? Think about the troubled parts of the world. Think of the situation in Kabul or in Afghanistan, where people in the changed circumstances now, many people who are trapped there don't see any hope, especially women. When there is so much external challenges there, or poverty or homelessness, all these problems are real. But when we are faced with such problems, then most of our time and energy are going to go towards solving those problems. At that time, in that situation, thinking about the Atman and freedom just seems so much of a privilege. It would be difficult, extremely difficult, if not impossible then. And if we look at our situation today, that we don't have to pass sleepless nights thinking that there might be some bombing raid, or that we don't have to worry about where am I going to have my food the next day. So this is a blessing. But this blessing is not going to be there with us for eternity. After this body dies, it's still a mystery. We have no idea where and in what situation we will be born. And because of this uncertainty, the book says, use your present blessing to be free. Because if I'm free now, I don't have to worry about it. But it's not just about my freedom. If I am free, I have a better chance of then helping others around me be free as well. If I'm in bondage, all that I can do is even drag others to greater bondage. The Upanishad says, Andhe naiva niyamana yathandhaha. If I have to guide someone, if there is a blind person who needs help in navigating their way on the street, I will be able to help them if I have eyes, if I can see. But if I am blind myself, then how can I help others? I cannot see the way myself. How can I show the way to others? So even in order to help others, I must have the ability to help others myself. So if I want to help others find freedom, I must become free myself first. That's the idea. Look at verse 8. Ato vimuktiyai prayateta vidvan sanyasta bahyartha sukhasprahassan santam mahantam samupetya deshikam tenopadishtartha samahitatma. Therefore, the wise should strive to attain spiritual freedom after giving up the desire for enjoyment of external objects. Approaching an enlightened and virtuous teacher, the mind should be focused on the truth taught by the teacher. The desire for external objects, bahya artha, bahya is external, artha is objects, sukha, enjoyment, spruhaha, desire, that's the word, sanyasta bahyartha sukha spruhaha. Why is desire for external objects a problem? Because it drags us into greater bondage. There is a story of a king named Yati. Very briefly it is, so this king who lacked nothing, who lived a long life, but eventually, as every human being will experience, this king became old. When old age set in, clearly, the vitality of the body and mind becomes less with age. So this king, who had all the privileges, all the avenues for enjoyment available, could no longer enjoy as much as he did when he was young, because now his body has become old. And so he was so frustrated that he somehow wanted to continue that form of enjoyment that he had had all his life. See, and he became depressed. He went completely out of his mind. Like, what am I going to do now? I'm so old. He had his son, who loved his father very much, was very sad looking at the condition of his father. And so he goes to his father and says, "Father, I know you are frustrated because of old age, that you would like to be young again so you can continue enjoying the pleasures of life." And this son makes a remarkable offer to his father. He says, "Father, take my youth. I will take your old age and you take my youth." And don't ask me how they did it, but the story says that's what it is. Just imagine. This might seem shocking to many of us, but when we become consumed by certain idea, we do stupid things. We do terrible things. So at that time, This king didn't even realize what he was doing. He's taking the youth of his own son for his own enjoyment. So we read that he became young again, Yayati, and continued with his life of enjoyment, sensual enjoyment. But again, he's not going to be frozen in time. So with that, young body became old again. And now he's like, what am I going to do now? Eventually, he learned a lesson. And that's a very often quoted verse in the Bhagavata. It goes in Sanskrit, it goes like this. Na jatu kama kamanam upabhogena shamyati havisha krishnavartmeva bhuya eva abhivardhate. Which means that desire cannot be fulfilled. Desires do not end through fulfillment of desires. Fulfilling a desire is like pouring fuel into fire, and it's only going to increase. And the reason is simple. If something is going to bring me pleasure, going to make me happy, I would want more of it. Why would I end? Sometimes we might think, especially when we get addicted to something, this is experienced by all of us in that situation. Suppose, say, you enjoy coffee or you enjoy smoking. And then we might say, I'll just have one, and then I'll feel fresh, or I'll feel energetic, and I'll feel wonderful. And then you smoke that one cigarette or take this one strong cup of black coffee, and it makes you feel good. Now, if it makes you feel good and if you can stop and then continue doing what should be done with that elevated sense of goodness, excellent. But what happens is, it makes me feel good. Maybe if I have one more, I'll feel better. And that's how it just builds on and on. So that's the problem with desire. You desire something, it fulfills you, it brings you joy, and then you want to repeat that desire. And that's why this verse says it's like pouring fuel. If you want to put out a fire, you can't add fuel into it. That's not going to put out the fire. So that was the lesson that king got. And that's why this verse points out that the wise should strive to attain spiritual freedom after giving up the desire for enjoyment of external objects. Because as long as there is desire, the desire will feed into more desires. And then, approaching an enlightened and virtuous teacher, Santam Mahantam Deshikam. Santam is enlightened. Mahantam means a virtuous teacher. So essentially, what this verse points out is, approach a teacher who is enlightened, who is spiritually enlightened, and virtuous, who is morally upright. So both morality and spirituality, they both are absolutely essential. True spirituality can be built only on a strong foundation of morality. Now, there are people who may not believe in God, may not believe in religion. People who identify as atheists or agnostics or humanists. It's possible to be moral even by being an atheist. So morality is not something belonging only to religion. Morality is necessary to be religious, but it's possible to be moral without being religious. But the reverse is not true. I cannot say, I don't care for morality, but I'm very religious. It doesn't work. So if I have to be religious, if I have to be spiritual, that is possible only if I have this strong moral foundation, strong ethical foundation. And that's why I approach a teacher who is both who has a strong morality, that's why virtuous, and who is spiritually enlightened, and learning from that teacher, the mind should be focused on the truth taught by that teacher. So this verse, verse 8, points out the importance of approaching a teacher. Most of the book, as we will see later, is a dialogue between the student and the teacher. So this initiates what the process is of a student approaching a teacher. Verse 9. Uddharet atmanatmanam magnam samsara varidhau yogarudhattvamasadya samyak darshana nishtaya. After attaining proficiency in yoga, lift the self which is immersed in the ocean of the world by the self which is dedicated to right perception. So this word yoga rudha comes in the Gita, 6th chapter of the Gita, 4th verse. It goes like this: Yada hi nendriyartheshu na karmasvanusajjate sarvasankalpa sannyasi yoga rudhastadochyate. Which means, when there is not attachment either to sense objects or to action, having renounced all intention, that is sankalpa, then the person is said to have reached proficiency in yoga. So, two things. First, trying to minimize our attachment to sense objects and to work. Again, minimizing attachment to work does not mean not to work. This is very important to remember, because we'll find a lot of condemnation of work in these verses, which means like, don't do any work, just sit tight in the corner of your room. That's not what is meant. What is meant is, don't have this ego that I'm the one who's doing the work. Actually, none of us can simply sit still. Doing something or the other is much easier in life than simply sitting still. That simply being still occurs in samadhi. So when someone says, well, I'm not doing any work, for most of us it really means I'm out of job. But work here means any activity of the body and mind, that is work. And so what this verse points out is that activity is natural. As long as there is body, as long as there is mind, they will be doing something or the other. And that's fine. But because my body and mind are doing something, for me to imagine I'm the one who is doing it, that's a problem. So when it says give up attachment to work, it means give up attachment to the idea that I'm the one who is working. So lift the self by the self. Although it sounds odd, we could say that we have really two selves. Or we could say one self who is kind of divided into two. A part of us which appreciates these higher values of life, a part of us which wants to be spiritual, a part of us which recognizes the importance of spiritual freedom, of detachment, and all these things. But there is the other part within us which also feels attracted to the world, to the sensual objects, to other goals in life. And the stress and the strain and the tension and the conflict that sometimes we experience is because of this kind of a tug of war that is occurring in our hearts. A part of us is dragging us in one direction, the other part is dragging us in the other direction. Sometimes people speak about the voice of conscience. I mean, one simple example would be, let's say you are accustomed to doing prayer and meditation every evening, morning and evening, and say evening someday it's time for your meditation, but there's also a game at Fenway and you love baseball. Now what are you going to do? You can't be in two places at the same time. So a part of you wants to go, even if you don't go to the Fenway Park itself, at least go to the TV and watch the game. The other part says, no, this is my prayer time. I should do this. And we know that there is this kind of a conflict. So even if you're doing one thing, a part of you is saying, oh, I don't know what the score is. Or if you're watching the TV and said, oh, today I'm going to miss my meditation. So that's the kind of a tension we experience. So what this verse points out is, lift the self by the self means that self, which is the higher mind, so to speak, that should lift up this lower self. So it's really a part of me which is closer to God, a part of me which is able to appreciate the spiritual goal more, should try to lift up the other part which is dragging me away from my spiritual ideal. So that is the meaning of a self which is immersed in the ocean of the world by the self which is dedicated to right perception. Okay, so we will stop here now. So some of these ideas we saw today was the meaning of identifying with the Atman, the meaning of the role work plays in our life. Why there is so much condemnation of karma? Not for karma itself, but because it generates the sense of karta, that I am the doer of action. So these are some of the important ideas to keep in mind in these 4 verses that we saw today. So if you have any thoughts, comments, questions, you can ask. We will have a microphone here. So come slowly from your seats. Even though you are the Atman, let your body come nearer to this speaker and feel free to ask your question. Yeah.
Swamiji, I can inaugurate this new setup.
Yes.
Swamiji, we know that the material money brings us a limited comfort. We read here, and over years we've all read that only freedom can lead to ultimate comfort. Yet why do so few of us spend our times striving for the true freedom? Why are we so captured by these comforts that seem so real to us?
Good question. The primary reason is freedom as the goal has not become real to most people. Freedom as a goal will become real when we experience bondage in our daily life. If bondage is real, then I would want to be free. So let's say if someone is now incarcerated, he's been put behind bars and said that you will be behind bars for the next 50 years. And that person clearly, if you are in prison, you have very little freedom. Now, if that person is told someday, say after spending 20 years in prison, that person is told, well, here is a choice. From tomorrow onwards, we'll give you a little bit more delicious food every day. That's one option. The second option is you're free. You can go out. I think it's a no-brainer. That person would say, just for a little bit of more delicious food, I don't want to spend the rest of my life behind prison. I would rather be free. So someone inside the prison has experienced that bondage and is able to appreciate that freedom more. So now when we look at our own lives, although the book keeps on saying freedom and moksha and so on, we have to ask ourselves, do I really feel I'm bound? Because with so much talk about a free country, a free society, we have freedom, we are progressives, and no doubt, compared to many other parts of the world, in many respects, we do enjoy a lot more freedom than many other beings on this planet do. Absolutely true. But still, can we say that we are completely free? Is there some bondage that we are experiencing within? To the extent I'm able to feel that lack of freedom within, then the goal of freedom will become real to me. Then I will understand the value of not remaining satisfied merely with some good, delicious meal or some comfortable bed, that I would need something more.
Swamiji, when we are talking about freedom, and you said that we have to be free from the bondage, attachment. So, in order to detach from something, we have to attach with something else. Mm-hmm. So, as a spiritual seeker, how do I get freedom?
It's like this. If I'm feeling the burning caused by bondage, I will want to be free. I'm not going to analyze that time. It's like a house is on fire. When the house is on fire, I just want to be free. I'm not then going to worry about it. Just going to, out of desperation, I'll just do anything possible to be free. But if the situation is not as dire as a house on fire, then I have a time to think, let me see, I can try to do it next year or 2 years later. So similarly in our situation now, depending on how much we feel that my freedom is being curtailed, the intensity of my wanting to be free will depend on how much I'm suffering due to bondage right now. Yeah.
Swamiji, I think I'm a little stuck on a point about the means to freedom being through knowledge of myself as the Atman. It seems though it's either something that I have to know intellectually, which I feel like I have some grasp of it, but it hasn't really sunk in, or it's something that I need to experience through meditation. But then it seems like that would be contradictory, since the Atman is something, it's not an object of experience. So where does this knowledge come from if it's not merely intellectual and it's not an experience?
Good, yeah. So the knowledge doesn't come from outside. The knowledge is already inside. We don't have to become the Atman. We are already the Atman. But the Atman is supposedly buried under these layers of ignorance. So what we are really doing is removing these ignorance layers above us. And therefore, the primary practice is looking at the body and saying, this is not me, this is perishable, looking at the mind. And so kind of eliminating whatever can be eliminated. We will reach finally a point where there is nothing to eliminate. And then at that point, we will be what we always have been. So knowledge is not to be acquired, but the seeming ignorance that has come upon us, that has to be removed. And when we remove that ignorance, we will know that there was never any ignorance to begin with. Yes.
So if ignorance is the problem and knowledge is the solution, how can we get that knowledge through bhakti or karma directly? Is it possible?
Of course it's possible. So, please. The path of bhakti, that's a whole different framework. But one way to understand that is that it purifies my heart. And through God's grace, whatever, all the knowledge that I want, through God's grace, the layers are removed and knowledge comes. So yes, bhakti is also a way to attain it. In fact, later on in this book, Vivekachudamani itself will address this topic of bhakti. And so at that time we will study a little bit more deeply about it. Yeah. Shrikant.
Swamiji mentioned about the punarjanma. So if somebody leads the moral life in this janma,
Come closer to the mic.
is there a guarantee that he is going to be human being again? If he does live with moral life or follow sattvic life, because it is the human janma where we have a chance to attain enlightenment.
It's not for me to say whether there is any guarantee or not, but I think it's good not to remain stuck to the position that, I understand the book itself says it's a great blessing to be a human being, but not to remain stuck to the idea that, well, if I'm not a human being, then there is no chance for me to be liberated. So just do the right thing, and then the Gita says, Gahana karmano gatihi. The ways of karma are inscrutable. So we don't know what I should do now to get a human birth. What is a better approach is, don't even think about rebirth. Instead of planning of what I should do now to get a better birth next time, ask yourself, what should I do now that I don't have to be born again? Why can't I get that knowledge of the Atman and just be free forever? And if I strive to do that, for whatever reason, if I don't succeed, if I don't attain that knowledge before I die, then as the Gita promises, that good karma, that good intention, those good samskaras will provide me an opportunity in the next birth to be born in a favorable circumstances in which I can continue my spiritual journey. Now, what those favorable circumstances are, we don't know. We just have to trust that good begets good. Yeah.
Swami, I'm a little confused as to what it means to give up the notion that I'm the doer, whether it's good actions or negative actions or what. Can you just talk a little bit more about what that means and how does one surrender or give up the notion that I'm the doer?
Okay, good. Whenever we are doing something, we have to look at what is actually happening. For instance now, if I lift up this book in my hand, looking deeply, that's the book. So if I lift it in my hand and start reading, so now I'm doing something. I'm reading a book. So then there is a sense of doership. I'm doing something, I'm reading. But if I actually look deeply and say, what exactly is happening? So this particular thing called hand, which is also made up of atoms and molecules, I lifted this other object called the book, which is also made up of material particles. I'm holding it before my eyes, which is also another one organ, just part of the body, which is made up of material particles, and go through this entire mechanism of perception and comprehension in the brain and so on. And ultimately, that sense is like this book is being read. So these different particles of matter are involved into this whole process of reading. And then I am thinking I am reading. So recognizing that I am not the doer means recognizing exactly what is happening with merely guna. The Gita says, guna guneshu vartante. It's the play of the gunas. That material particles in the world are interacting with one another. And if I am identified with any of those particles, I appropriate that activity to myself. For instance, if someone else picks up this book and starts reading, I'm not going to feel I am reading it, because none of the particles involved in that, I'm identified with it. Now I feel I'm reading it because I feel this is my hand, these are my eyes, this is my head, therefore I'm the one who is reading it. Now if I can eliminate that sense of my from all of this, then I'm giving up the idea of doership. So the book will be read without me feeling I am reading it. That's one way of looking at it. Yeah. Yes.
Namaskar, Swamiji. Swamiji, what does it mean when we say we need to give up desires? Because as a human being, we get desires all the time in our brain. You know, whether at work or family life, there are constantly desires and goals that come. So when we say giving up desires, does that mean that we have to accept that the desires will come, but then let go of the outcome of those desires? Because I can't stop the desires from, coming in my mind.
Yeah.
So how do we battle that?
Okay, good question. Whatever joy and sorrow that we experience in life can be traced directly or indirectly to the desires that we have. And so if we desire something, either that desire is going to be fulfilled or it's not going to be fulfilled. If it is fulfilled, it's going to make me happy. If it's not fulfilled, it's going to make me unhappy. So if I'm okay with the experience of joy and sorrow that alternates in my life, then that's okay with desires. So desires are not to be demonized in this way. It's just that can I desire, for instance, a desire for God, a desire for spirituality, a desire to have a spiritual ideal is also a desire. But if that desire can help try to remove other desires that I have, then that's a good desire. So, well, giving up desire seems like a very tall order. For a spiritual seeker, at least we can make a good beginning by at least minimizing our desires, by asking ourselves that what are the things that I really want in life? What is the thing that I'm really hankering in life? And if it's easier to do so, just make a list. And then look at that list every now and then and ask yourself, do I really need this or can I do without it? Now, the shorter that list becomes, the more free I'm going to feel. The longer that list is, the more tethered my existence becomes. That's essentially the situation. And so, this intense desire to be free, it's called mumukshutva, that will come in the subsequent verses. That intense desire to be free will take away all other desires. It's a little bit like if someone is, say, interested in music or in learning, say, classical music, for instance, or playing a particular instrument and loves it, enjoys doing it. So that desire to learn a particular instrument to play or desire for music will be if it becomes very strong, then oftentimes you will see in that person other desires kind of go into the background. When mom will say, hey, come and you haven't eaten anything, go and eat. He said, no, I want to listen to this music. So again, the desire for food, the desire for this will become less because all of my capacity to desire has gone in one direction. So if that is possible with music, that will also eventually become possible if all of my desires are directed toward the spiritual ideal. That doesn't mean that I will stop doing other things. All those things will occur in my life. It's just that I will not be hankering after them. I will not be losing my sleep over them. That's the idea. So we will stop here today, and we will start with verse 10 when we meet next Wednesday. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhuhu. So on Sunday, we will have the satsang as usual at 11 o'clock. And on Saturday, we will start our weekly meditation. Before the pandemic, we used to do it twice a week on Tuesday and Saturday. But right now, we will have only once a week on Saturday evening at 6 to 7. And eventually, when the things open up more and when there's no longer any need to put all these masks, etc., we'll have meditation on other days as well. So let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.